Mr. Isaac, earlier I laid out my concerns that this bill lacks safeguards to prevent taxpayer dollars from subsidizing investments of liberal billionaires and other politically connected individuals. We shouldn't be risking the hard-working people's tax dollars for investment in electrical vehicles or their charging stations for the residents of coastal states. If coastal states want to prop up green banks and subsidize their friends, then of course they can do it. But Oklahomans shouldn't be subsidizing them in the risk investments. So, Mr. Isaac, is it possible, the way the bill's written, for Elon Musk or some of his billionaire buddies to get funding for their green ideas?
Absolutely, sir. And that's one of the reasons why I think people are fleeing California and moving to Texas and moving to Oklahoma. They have incredible, unreliable electricity. Rolling outages were nothing new to them. Last August when they happened, they were certainly something new to Texas, and that shouldn't be the case. But there are some concerns about oversight, much like I, when I was an elected official, wouldn't hire an ethics attorney without any experience. It's certainly concern for oversight with the board for this particular piece of legislation.
That's a very good answer. Mr. Chairman, we went ahead and started without you. Would you like to have me complete my questions?
Oh, please, yes.
All right, that's fine. And then I'd also, to you, Mr. Isaac, if Wall Street is already funding green projects to the tune of $100 billion a year, won't a government program like this just fund the worst projects that can't compete for private funding? Would that be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at what BlackRock is doing, they have over $9 trillion in managed assets. When they're part of this Climate Action 100 Plus, it is really a cartel that's colluding to force energy businesses to divest of their business models for arbitrary reductions in emissions that aren't even named in the act. The Climate Action 100 Plus manages over $50 trillion in managed assets. That is a world leader. Looking at BlackRock alone, if you just look at they manage, if that were GDP, they'd be the third largest country in the world. And they're just really a 20% of the Climate Action 100 Plus that is really looking to discriminate against energy produced responsibly here in the United States, arguably more responsibly than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Commissioner Bell, you're from Wyoming and you know well of the benefits of coal, as you said in your testimony. This bill seeks to close coal-fired power plants through its Cash for Carbon program. Commissioner Bell, will you speak to the economic impact this plan would have on coal country? Your coal country, and in a way we are too.
Yeah, certainly. Mr. Chairman, Senator Inhofe, thank you for that. I think that's why we would certainly be opposed to this. Coal country really coal really drives Wyoming, not only our area, but when I spoke in my testimony, all of our education in Wyoming is really funded by mineral production, most of that being coal. From 2000 to now, coal bid bonus money actually paid for $2 billion of school facilities across the state of Wyoming. So really, there is no answer for what would be the impact to Wyoming with something like this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Would you expect Americans' energy bills to go up or down with the closing down of the coal-fired power plants?
Yeah, I would certainly expect Americans' energy bills to go much higher. We're blessed with some very low energy prices in Wyoming because we have mine-mouth operations that provide incredibly affordable power. We can provide that to the rest of the United States and extremely reliable power with that coal if allowed to do so.
But it would result in much higher costs for energy.
No question.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I do have a commitment on the floor in just 15 minutes, so I would just like to get a couple of things out with our great witnesses that we have today. First of all, Commissioner Bell, the White House climate czar John Kerry says that fossil energy workers can make solar panels. But Secretary Kerry refuses to acknowledge solar installers earn far less than oil rig workers or coal miners, which would be devastating to millions of hardworking Americans. Commissioner Bell, do you share my concern for lost wages under Secretary Kerry's Green New Deal dream scenario for fossil energy workers?
Senator Inhofe, thank you for that question. Yes, I really concerns me that those jobs would not be located in Wyoming, for one, and that those jobs aren't going to be the same wages as mineral production. It really concerns me. I don't think that what he's proposing honestly is feasible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What do you think about that, Mr. Isaac?
Yeah, I think it's again, this fixation on carbon dioxide. Again, if we eliminate all fossil fuel use by 2030, doubling President Biden's ambitious goal, the temperature mitigation using the same models that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change uses would mean there'd be a less than 0.2 of a degree difference by the end of the century. But we would increase electricity costs more than twofold on the American consumers for products that are predominantly made overseas, whether it's the rare earth elements that go into wind and solar technology that are mined in China and places like the Congo and Africa that do not have the environmental or labor standards that we do here in the United States. The UNICEF reports that over 40,000 children between the ages of 4 years old and 13-year-olds are working in mines in the Congo. 40,000 children mining so that we can have our solar panels and our electric cars and our computer technology. And those components that they're mining are all here in the United States. We should be mining and producing those products right here in the United States with our environmental leadership record that we have. Number one when it comes to access for clean and safe drinking water in the world, and number one when it comes to reducing harmful pollutions of highly populated countries.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I think you covered it very well, the successes that we've had here, and particularly in the United States. Now, as you know, the board of directors would be entirely controlled under this advisory committee experience that we're talking about today, be controlled by Washington. Another serious flaw is the structure of its 13-member advisory board, which would be chosen by the board of directors. Now, the advisory committee would be responsible for advising bank on its investment programs and briefing Congress on banks' activities. None of the advisory committee members would be required to have any banking sector experience. Now, I don't think I've ever run into this before, where they're putting someone in that advisory category that doesn't have any background in it at all. Do you agree that any bank advisory committee that lacks the banking sector experience would be imprudent and highly unusual?
It'd be incredibly unusual.
Can you think of any examples where that is actually happening today?
Yeah, I mentioned an ethics attorney. I wouldn't hire one that didn't have experience. My accountant, I wouldn't hire one fresh out of college, or maybe one that had no college experience whatsoever. That would be incredibly alarming to me. But you look at the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and a lot of this came to light after the freeze that we saw in Texas in February. There were numerous board members, self-appointed, picked by the industry, that didn't even live in the United States, that didn't live in Texas, that certainly weren't served or lived in the area that they were supposed to be serving in that electric grid in Texas. It's much like you're supposed to represent members of the state where you're from. You certainly don't want someone representing Oklahoma that's not from Oklahoma in the U.S. Senate. And so that board of directors raises some alarms for me, just based on some recent experience that we've seen in Texas and how unreliable our grid proved to be because we had outside leadership managing our grid that weren't
good.
from Texas.
Yeah, that's a great statement. Mr. Chairman, I do have a commitment on the floor, but I appreciate very much the opportunity for our witnesses to be heard, because it is a significant piece of legislation, and we have opinions on it, as we've expressed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right?